I was sitting at the head of the table, trying to make myself as small as possible, when my mother suddenly stood, wine glass in hand. The room quieted instantly, everyone sensing the storm about to unfold. "Since we're all gathered," she began, her tone sharp and deliberate, "I need to speak about Aurora's ongoing failure to contribute anything meaningful to this family." My fork slipped from my fingers and clattered onto my plate. I tried to shrink into the chair, hoping the floor would swallow me whole. What she didn't realize was that my phone had been buzzing nonstop all evening with a call that would completely upend everything she thought she knew about me. "I'm Aurora. I'm 27. 3 years ago, I made the decision that my family still treats as a personal betrayal. I walked away from law school, our family's crown jewel of success, and chose to pursue software engineering. To them, this was more than a bad choice. It was an act of defiance, a betrayal of generations of ambition and carefully constructed reputation. My mother, the consummate investment banker, lives for financial achievement. My father, a surgeon, saves lives daily, and my siblings, both accomplished lawyers, march confidently along the path our family has laid for us. And then there's me, the daughter who abandoned all that for computers. For 3 long years, I've poured my heart and soul into a tech startup, and every family gathering has been a public reminder of my mistake. They've whispered to each other, introduced me as still figuring things out, and treated my career choice like a personal affront to everything they stand for. I've learned to keep my head down, smile politely, and accept my place as the family disappointment, the one they show off only to demonstrate what not to do. Christmas at the estate is always a production. This year was no different. Extended family, old friends, business acquaintances, neighbors who've known us for decades. I stepped in, bracing myself for the inevitable questions and thinly veiled critiques. The usual routine played out perfectly. Polite inquiries about my tech work, concerned looks when I mentioned progress, whispered speculation about when I'd get serious. Meanwhile, the room gleamed with our grandmother's finest china, crystal, and silverware, everyone dressed in their holiday best, ready to celebrate another year of familial achievement. Success stories paraded around me like a taunt. My cousin had made partner at her firm, my brother bought a second house, my sister won a headline-making case. Then came my mother's turn. "Aurora," she said with that practiced tight smile reserved for disappointment, "is still figuring things out." A hush fell over the table for a fraction of a second before the conversation resumed, leaving me to quietly push my prime rib around my plate. But the real blow came later. As dinner wound down, my mother rose again, wineglass raised, ready for her traditional Christmas toast. "I want to thank everyone for being here," she began, her eyes glinting with purpose. "Our family has always valued achievement, excellence, and meaningful contributions to the world. And while everyone else at this table has succeeded admirably, Aurora continues to squander her law degree on this computer fantasy." 20 eyes turned to me, each filled with judgment, pity, and disbelief. My uncle nodded solemnly. "Kids these days," he muttered, "think they can chase dreams instead of building real careers." "Sweetheart," my mother continued, her voice honeyed and cutting at once, "it's been 3 years. When will you accept that this tech venture isn't working?" I opened my mouth to speak. "Actually, the company is thriving. My father's voice, precise and commanding, cut through me. "We've been patient with this phase, Aurora. But you are 27. It's time to face reality." My mother's triumphant smile widened. "Which is why," she announced, her voice dripping with self-righteous authority, "Aurora will be excluded from any inheritance discussions until she proves she can contribute something meaningful to this family's legacy." At that moment, the family lawyer, Mr. Henderson, reached into his briefcase and extracted a thick stack of papers, placing them squarely on the table, right next to the cranberry sauce. "The inheritance restructuring documents are ready for signatures," he said, as if we were merely discussing dessert options. My stomach plummeted. This wasn't just a Christmas toast gone wrong. It was meticulously planned humiliation, designed to assert control and undermine me publicly. "We cannot leave family wealth to someone who throws away golden opportunities on fantasies," my uncle declared, stabbing his fork into his mashed potatoes for emphasis. "It would be reckless. My mother read from her prepared notes like a sermon. 3 years of law school tuition wasted. $60,000 invested in her education gone. A life that should have been perfectly mapped out, abandoned. And there I sat, trapped in a tableau of judgment, my every choice scrutinized, my success invisible to the very people who should have been proud. But little did they know, the call buzzing quietly in my pocket carried a different truth. I wasn't the failure they painted me to be. And this Christmas, their carefully curated narrative of control and disappointment was about to collide head-on with the reality of what I had built. Christmas dinner had always been a performance in my family, but this year it felt like I was the unwilling star of a public execution. The table was crowded with polished silverware, cranberry sauce in crystal bowls, and relatives who'd rehearsed their opinions of my life as though they were delivering opening statements in court. My mother started it, of course she did, lifting her wine glass like a gavel. Since everyone's gathered, she said, we need to talk about Aurora's situation. Her education, her talent, her potential completely squandered. She's living in a shoebox apartment, driving a car older than some of the children at this table. For what? A computer hobby. Forks clinked against plates. The verdicts began to roll in. My aunt compared me to her neighbor's son who outgrew his video game phase and was now an accountant. My cousin piped up with a story about someone who finally came to their senses and found a steady, respectable job. My grandmother sighed in theatrical disappointment. I just don't understand how someone so bright can be so unrealistic. Then came the knockout blow. Mrs. Patterson, my mother's oldest friend, dabbed her mouth with a napkin and smiled the kind of smile you give before drawing blood. My daughter Jennifer was just promoted to senior associate at Miller and Associates, she said sweetly. She's already on partner track. Bought a house in Westchester last month. That's what real success looks like at 27. My mother seized on the example like a prosecutor with new evidence. Exactly. Jennifer built a real career, while Aurora is still playing with computers in her bedroom. Smart choices lead to smart results. I sat there, my phone buzzing against my leg like a trapped insect. Calls, texts, emails, all from the same names. My attorney, my business partner, the acquisition team. Every time I excused myself to the bathroom, the calls multiplied. Numbers I knew by heart. Conversations I needed to have. Decisions I couldn't miss. And every time I returned to the table, the criticism had escalated another notch. Now they were discussing timelines when I might wake up and return to law school. My father leaned forward, voice heavy with authority. I can still get you readmitted, he said. Your sabbatical hasn't gone on too long. We're not trying to punish you. We're trying to save you from yourself. Sometimes tough love is necessary. Across the table, Maya, my childhood best friend and Mrs. Patterson's reluctant plus one, caught my eye. She knew. She was the only one who did. She knew what the calls were about. She knew that, while my family publicly dissected my life choices, I was on the verge of the most important deal of my career. My father's voice sharpened. So, Aurora, he said, are you ready to admit this was a mistake and commit to law school? Or do you plan to keep embarrassing this family with your stubbornness? 20 sets of eyes pinned me to my chair. My phone vibrated again. 7 missed calls. A text from my lawyer. Aurora, Google's team is waiting. We need you here by 9 p.m. to finalize. It was 8:15. They thought they were humiliating a failure. They had no idea they were humiliating the most successful person in the room. For 6 months, I'd been quietly negotiating with Google. My failing startup had created something revolutionary, an AI-powered financial analytics platform with a 94% accuracy rate in predicting market trends. We had 3 major beta clients, including 2 Fortune 500s. When the whispers reached Silicon Valley, Google reached out immediately. The calls I was missing weren't from bill collectors or old friends worried about me. They were from my lawyer, my co-founder, and Google's lead counsel. The paperwork was ready. The terms were set. All I had to do was sign. $50 million for the computer hobby my family mocked. Maya's glare burned across the table. She could barely contain her fury at watching them tear me apart while I sat on the biggest deal of my life. When my mother launched into yet another speech about family standards, Maya deliberately tipped over her water glass. Crystal shattered. Everyone jumped. It was just enough chaos for me to glance at my phone again. Another message from my business partner. Google's getting impatient. They need an answer tonight, or they're walking. My father started one of his favorite analogies, the medical kind. Sometimes you have to cut out infected tissue to save the healthy body. Aurora's attitude is becoming toxic to our family's reputation. The inheritance lawyer, because of course there was an inheritance lawyer at Christmas dinner, slid a document across the table. Sign this, he said. A statement of intent to re-enroll in law school this fall. It would show good faith. Around me, relatives traded redemption stories like parables. A great uncle talked about a cousin who'd abandoned painting to become an accountant. Best decision she ever made, he said, nodding gravely. Maya suddenly stood, her chair scraping against the hardwood. I think I need some air, she announced. Then she looked directly at me. Aurora, want to come out to the terrace with me? Her voice was calm, but her eyes were fierce. It was my lifeline. I put down my fork, feeling the vibration of another incoming call against my thigh. This time, I didn't ignore it. I barely had a chance to respond when my mother cut me off. Aurora needs to stay and be part of this discussion. This is about her future. My phone buzzed again. It was another call from Google's lead counsel. I glanced at it, but there was no time. I had to let it go to voicemail. There I sat, trapped in a room where my family was debating my life like I was a problem they needed to fix. We're giving you one last chance, my father declared. Admit this tech venture was a mistake. Commit to law school, and we might consider welcoming you back into the family fold. Otherwise, you're willingly cutting yourself off from everything we've built. The room went quiet, the weight of 20 eyes boring into me, waiting for my answer. Maya, sitting across the table, looked at me with desperation. She knew what was at stake. This wasn't just another family argument. I had an appointment that could define the rest of my life, and it was already 8:45 p.m. I stood up slowly, the scrape of my chair echoing through the room. Every eye in the room followed me, anticipating my defeat. That's when my phone rang again. I answered immediately. Aurora Chin, a voice asked. This is David Martinez from Google's legal team. We've been trying to reach you all evening. We need your signature tonight to finalize the $50 million acquisition of your company. Our team is ready, but we need you at the office within the next 30 minutes, or we'll have to postpone until after the holidays. The room fell silent. Forks hovered in midair. Wine glasses stopped mid-toast. My mother's face drained of color. My uncle whispered under his breath, 50 million? I kept the line on speaker, my voice calm and collected. David, I apologize for missing your calls. I'm currently in a family meeting where they're debating removing me from inheritance because my startup is supposedly failing. A few nervous chuckles came from the Google side. Well, Miss Chun, David said, tonight's acquisition might give them a very different perspective. My father's jaw dropped. Aurora, what is this? I looked directly at my mother. You want to talk about contribution to the family? I just built something worth more than your entire inheritance fund combined. I explained calmly. My AI software predicted financial markets with 94% accuracy. I had contracts with Morgan Stanley, Goldman Sachs, and BlackRock. Google hadn't just noticed my company. They were fast-tracking the acquisition because 3 other tech giants were competing for it. But you said you were struggling, my mother stammered. Struggling doesn't mean failing, I replied. Every dollar I earned went back into the company. Every sacrifice I made was an investment in something bigger than any of you could see at the time. While you worried about appearances, I was building something revolutionary. The lawyer, who had been so eager to cut me off from my inheritance, fumbled with his papers. I confirmed with David that I would be at the office in 20 minutes. Congratulations, Miss Chun, he said. This is one of the largest AI acquisitions we've completed this year. The dining room erupted with frantic chatter. Aurora, we always believed in you, my father shouted. We were just worried about your future, my mother added. My uncle nodded, adding, incredible work. Truly impressive business acumen. I looked around at their panicked, scrambling faces and spoke firmly. You removed me from inheritance for being unsuccessful. Stay removed from my success. That's your choice. Maya grinned from across the table. I'll drive you, she said, the pride in her voice impossible to miss. Still on speakerphone with Google's team, we left my family sitting in stunned silence, their inheritance papers scattered across the table like forgotten dreams. By 9:47 p.m. on Christmas night, I signed the acquisition papers in Google's downtown office. $50 million for 3 years of building what some called a hobby. The next morning, my phone flooded with missed calls from my family, voice messages filled with congratulations and invitations to celebrate. I didn't return a single one. Maya and I spent the next week planning our next venture. She left her marketing job to join me as a business partner, and we started a fund to help young entrepreneurs whose families didn't support their dreams. Within a month, the local business press had covered the acquisition. The very same people who had laughed at my choices were now calling my parents at social events, praising their successful tech daughter. That Christmas night taught me something invaluable. The people who are supposed to lift you up don't always need proof of your worth to respect you. Sometimes, the only validation you need is from yourself. Don't let anyone else define your potential, especially those who can't see past their narrow view of success. If this story inspires you to keep chasing your dreams, even when others doubt you, hit that subscribe button. Share your story in the comments of a time someone underestimated you right before your breakthrough. And remember, the best revenge isn't proving someone wrong. It's succeeding so loudly they can't ignore you.